Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. As you can see, we are back in Gaffer and we will be looking into shading this beautiful dragon. I will be going into mainly the shading setup. We will be touching up on a little bit of lighting, how to place nice rim and kick lights, but for the most part we will be focusing on standard surface shading, how to use QuickConnect features, and a couple of more things. So be sure to check it out, and as usual the scene files will be uploaded to my Patreon, and if you want to support me there's also some membership options on my Patreon. And if you have any suggestions for future content, as usual, leave me a comment below. I'm happy to read through those. So now let's get going into Gaffer shading with this dragon. Alright, so now that you're a little bit more familiar with Gaffer based on my previous introduction tutorial, I think we can now have a look in a more shader orientated session. There will be some lighting, but it will be mainly about shading. You can see that the UI is unchanged from the previous video. This is not my default UI, but I still keep it as a default just for this tutorial. Alright, so let's get right into it. Create a scene reader because we want to create this nice looking dragon. And I'm just pasting here a path to my Alembic file for the dragon. And as usual, all my scene files will be available on my Patreon for you to follow along if you feel like it. And there is our dragon. So the first thing what I want to do, it's always nice to be able to quickly rotate things. So what I just want to do is create a transform node at the bottom here. And I want to target my dragon. Usually, as I did before, I create a group first. The group node will just group everything under geo. And then I could technically just translate the geo group here, dragging from the hierarchy view onto the transform. And then making sure that everything is expanded like that. And then first frame, we can right click on rotate Y, set a key, go to the last frame, go with 360. And now we have a rotating dragon. By default, the curves I believe are interpolated. So what we can do, I think we can right click here, interpolation, linear, and then probably on the last key, I'm not sure if that is inherited, that as well. So now we have a linear curve. You can also look at these things obviously in the animation editor, open it up, translate Y, frame it, and now it's linear. So that's pretty cool. We can assign a shader, why not? So we can do a shader assignment as a scene setup like that, and we can do a standard surface shader, drop that in. So now that is hooked up. And then we also would need to go along and create our lights, because without lights there is no shaders. Start off with a sky dome and we parent that into our scene, and then we again group them as we did before. This will be LGT for lights, and then we also want a similar setup. Just copy and paste the setup. Oh, not sure why that was an error. Copy and paste. I'm not sure. Maybe I pasted the wrong stuff. And then we want to group again, and then we just want to create the camera. You don't have to do the grouping stage, as I said previously. It's just to keep your graph nice and organized. I feel that's always nice. And then now it's all about framing things. So we can obviously view through the camera, which is this one. Then we can also create a standard options quite quick just to set our default resolutions and stuff. Camera is also render cam. You can see it's all repetitive from the previous video, but it will get better and new. Horizontal multiplier we have on 1. Then we are back at the bottom. We enable camera movements, frame our little dragon. Then we can zoom out a little, place it as we like it, and now our dragon is rotating. So that is a initial setup. And now let's get our Arnold options down here. Arnold options, so we can initialize our render setups. Rendering, that's all good. Sampling, we will go on GPU, so we can probably go a little bit higher on the AA initially. Content 5, and we enable adaptive, and we go maybe 30 for now. Threshold on, change the device to GPU. Let's save the scene and let's see what we get. So a good test, you can use the OpenGL quickly, or you can set up the outputs quick. So outputs for what we want to actually render. So we will choose interactive Arnold beauty, and then we want an interactive render, and we do want to catalog stuff we all did before. View from here. The default renderer has not been set in the standard options. Arnold, now that should follow here. Complaining about licensing, which is totally fine. Control 3 for my catalog, hit 3. There we go. This is our render. And what we can also do for Lookdev, because by default it's pretty big, we can do an options tweak to just maybe for now render half res, so plus from scene, and pick the resolution multiplier 0.5. And now we can hit home, and this is now our initial Arnold render. So standard surface shader defaults are 0.8, I believe. We can hit Ctrl G to group them, and we can go 1.8, and this is now our basic material. Pretty nice, pretty quick. Okay, so now let's get our sky dome light working. And I'm just pasting an image node here with the path already set, so we can just hook that up. And this is my studio light. We need to make sure we set it to lat long. That way we get the correct orientation. And then I feel for now we can just leave it at that and then start working with the shader. Most of you probably have, when doing Lookdev, the desire to display the current node in the render, right? So let's say I want to create a noise and I'd put that into my base color. This is now what it's kind of looking like. But let's say you're driving a bump map with it or something, then you would always like to first see it like this, change the parameters. Let's say we want to change the scale, all of that, and then go back to the standard surface shader and then see the result, right? So this out of the box does not exist in Gaffer, which is unfortunate. Maybe it will be implemented natively, but there is a little tool set in Image Engine that we can use and that I can share, which you can find in the scene files as well. So let me show you how to get that going. On Windows, you would go to your documents. In my case, it's my documents, and then under Gaffer, where you also have all sorts of other applications, there's a Gaffer startup, and then there's a GUI section. If you don't have it, you can create it, but by default, I think it is being generated because it fills in recent files and bookmarks. And then you just paste the file that you will see in my in the scene files of this video. And then we can edit this quickly in the notepad so you can see what it's all about. But technically, it's creating a new entry, and if you right click on a plug, and then there's a feature at the bottom here. If you hit P, essentially it creates this can QuickConnect node, and then it will try to connect things. All right. So once this is in your GUI folder, then you would just need to reopen Gaffer. And now what that allows us to do is we can actually right click, let's say this shader assignment port, and say target it for quick connections, which is pretty nifty. So if I click this, you can now see the port is kind of green. And if I now, let's say, have a noise and maybe a different noise with a different amplitude like that, I can now, first of all, go back down here, start the render, and 3. I could now go to the noise, hit P, and then you can see it reconnects everything. And now it's showing this texture. If I hit P here, now it jumps to this. If I hit P here, it jumps back to my shader. So that's a pretty nifty way to quickly, it's kind of like the Maya name is isolate selected. In Houdini, it's called the debug viewer, or yeah, in Houdini, it's like that. So I think other applications have a similar setup for this. All right, and now this allows us to actually go into shading and try something pretty nice. So what we can do first is, I like this to be kind of a metallic dragon. So specular and base should be opened up. We can go maybe for now a 0.5 base. It's like a little bit darker than Chrome. I think Chrome is around 0.65, 0.7. Then we enable metalness, and we get this kind of rough looking dragon, reduce the roughness. So now it's nice and crispy. And again, we can always rotate by changing the timeline if we need to see different angles. And what I like to do now is I want to change the roughness based on curvature. So pretty straightforward stuff. Create the curvature node AI curvature. See how it looks by hitting P. This is what it is. And then we can quite easily control the look of it. So we can increase samples a little bit to get a little bit more detail. And then we can play with the multiplier to boost up the values, and then maybe the bias to control how sharp kind of the effect will be. And this is now something I like to do a lot, is to have a base roughness and then these edges that can be touched because they are protruding will be a little bit more shiny. So we can actually roughen it up a little, maybe like that. And then we can use this as a range, for instance. Connect this to a range node. This will go right into input, and then the range will go into specular roughness. We can just connect luminance red, and now you can already see something is happening, but our defaults are now 0 and 1 or close to, and we want to lift the black values so they don't reflect like a mirror. So quite easily we can just do 0.2 here, so they get lifted. And if we don't want a point like a 1 roughness value, which we don't want, maybe a 0.65, then this is now just remapped into kind of this look. And if we hit P on my standard surface shader, we get now a more harmonic look, I would say. And now let's try to create some little breakup. So we just create a cell noise. I'm just going through different noise types, cell noise, and let's make the size, actually, let's first connect it, see what we get. Bump 2D, this connects out to, this should be, I believe, because it's just a simple 2D, it should not go into the normal slot, it should go into the bump map. We can just connect it based on luminance. And then we go into the normal, and now our surface should be broken up. We can see the result by hitting P, way too big. So maybe, I don't know, let's try 15 and hit Ctrl G to group them. And now this is quite coarse. We can maybe try 2 octaves to get a little bit more detail. Go back here, hit P, and now obviously it's broken up pretty bad. Let's go reduce the height. And now we get some detail back in. It's obviously now quite broken up, and we don't want this bump map on the curvature itself, on the smooth surfaces. So we do a similar thing. We just maybe copy the range node, keep the connection, and then we can drive the height with it. So do the same thing like that. And now we already should see that it's not as drastic on the smooth areas, I think. Actually, it's the inverse. We need to invert this. So let's go back 0 and 1. We want this to be inverted, so 1 and 0. So now the black stuff does not have any bump map. And by playing with the input mins, now because we inverted it, the input maxes, we could now, control when the bump map kind of kicks in. And the bump map will slowly kick in where the value changes from black to white. And then obviously we should control the amount. So we don't want a crazy high bump value. So 0.2, but then we keep it on off where it's nice and specky. So let's see the shader from here. We can now see that it's kind of working. It's hard to see at the moment with a metallic shader. So maybe for now, just disable it and we can go darker so we can see it a little bit better what's going on. I'm not sure. Let's maybe keep it metallic. Yeah, there we go. Now we can see it probably better. And it's quite noisy, I agree. So we can actually go down here and just boost up our Arnold options. Maybe go 10 at first, adapt the sampling to 50. On GPU it's different values, so that should not matter too much. And now you can see it does clean up quite nicely. All right, that is now the first part of it. Maybe let's increase our gain for the bass, just a tad. And now I think we should start working on the color itself of the metal. And we can just use a simple color correct, but I think we should drive it based off the curvature as well. And let's get that going. So I would just use a remap color. So we have actually, this is an OSL node. Did you see it? The prefix is OSL remap color. So that's a native Gaffer node. It has a little bit more functionality, and then we can range it if we need to just control our curvature a little bit more. Again, we can hit P, so this is our current range, and I think it's pretty good. We can control it if we need to, but for now I think let's leave it at that. And then we can say max out will be, I think, the whites. Yeah. So we want to probably keep it white, but we want to control the minimum out. And let's pick some kind of greenish color, like a patina green, maybe deset it darker, maybe like that. And now, as I said, you can range it. So if you want just the edges to be white to get more contrast, you could just play with the input mins here. So now it's a little bit harsher and then the rest is kind of green. And let's see what that looks like if we hook it actually up. Base color, like that. So now we've got this little dragon. I feel it's too saturated. Let's check actually our roughness. What do we have set for roughness? It's 0.6, which is actually fine. Maybe roughen this just up. Sorry, deset it a little bit more. So that is already working quite nicely. And maybe the out should not be fully white, I think. Let's have it a little bit darker, like maybe 0.7 or so. So the white cleaner areas are not super white, I would say. And one thing I notice is at the moment the curvature looks just extremely even. So what you can do, we just multiply a noise on top of that. Noise like that, and we can just use a min operation. Maybe that should just be fine. AI min, and we use curvature, and we use the noise, and then we look at the result, hitting P, and now this is our noise texture. We can play with the amplitude, sorry, with the scale, and probably also the amplitude. Maybe we need to play more with the contrast than the amplitude. Let's go a remap in here. Arrange. So many different similar names for nodes. Hook that up. Like that. Hit P to see the range. Yeah, exactly. So this is way too soft. Let's make this something like this. Add detail. Maybe distort it a little bit just for the fun of it. And then we just crank it up so we have really black and white spots like that. So this will now break up. If we check the curvature now, you can see now the curvature is broken up and it's not just a perfectly smooth white line. So it depends on where you want to plug it in, but I think everything should be affected by that. So I'm just hooking it up everywhere where the curvature at the moment goes through. And now let's see the result. Everything is now, you can see, broken up. And if you feel that it's too much, we can adjust our range. Maybe go 0.1. And now there's a softer transition between what is fully black and fully white. So now there's a little bit more of a breakup going on. And we can see our dragon has some kind of nice properties to it. What we can also do, just for another demo here, is we can control, let's say, how the color fades off based on the normal angle. So we can pull in a state vector and we can change this to N for normals, and we can hit P, which doesn't work. Okay, maybe this is not supported, but then we can do control this as a mask. So we can do essentially vector or RGB to float. And we can pull in, let's say, the green channel. Not sure if this connects. It does connect. And then hook this up to, let's say, a color correct node. That's convert AI color images, this guy. And then input color of our current color goes in here. And then we want to use this RGBA to float as a mask to control the color fade from bottom to top, essentially. And let's see if we can visualize it here now. Yeah, there we go. So we just can't display the state vector in the viewer, but you can now see that we have this normal view, and we can change it from the red, green, and blue, which is equivalent to X, Y, and Z channels, because we are looking at a normal pass. And then we can control it if we need to. Let's say we add a range to just constrict the values. It depends on where you want to put it in. Input green, then we go back to the mask, green, And then we now have control about how strong this effect should be applied. And then looking in our color correct, what we can now do, we can essentially desaturate it. Let's go 0.1. And you can now see the tops here are desaturated, and we can tint it. We can make it a little bit yellow based on, let's say, sun exposure or anything like that. So now whatever is the top here, if we disable maybe the range, you can see that didn't work. But if we hook it up like that, we have our original fall off back. We can actually get rid of that. And now look at the shader. And this is now what our metallic part looks like. And what I always like to do, I like to add kind of dust or grime into those ridges, and it helps quite a lot to sell an image. If we create another standard surface shader right away, hook it up and give this some dust properties, which is roughness pretty high. Let's go 7.5, change the color to be some kind of, I don't know, yellow, that specular color. So that is not correct. We can right click a value, go to default, gets reset. Base is what I wanted to change. And let's go to something, I don't know, something like this. This could work. And then we would create a mix shader. And we then could mix 2 shaders together. Like that. Hit P to connect them. Now this is a 50-50 blend, which is pretty slow to do. So you should just make sure you have binary values as much as you can. So I'm creating a range and a curvature node as we did before, which then drives the mix value here. And let's now look at the range value. So whatever is now white will be, actually I didn't see it, will be the metallic one. So whatever is white is metallic, and that is what we want. We just want the really tight ridges. So in the curvature, you can change to concave. I think that is the first thing that we want to do. And if you increase the radius, you can now see wherever is white, the dust will kind of collect. And then the range, you can clamp it and then maybe boost the whites and then clamp the blacks a little. And now let's see what the mix shader looks like. All right, so we definitely need to invert this. So I was mistaken, I believe. So we can just switch up the inputs here. And there we go. Now whatever is in these ridges will be kind of dusty looking. And again, we can play with our ranges. Let's keep this on 0 and maybe boost this up. And now the kind of dirt is collected inside of this stuff. One thing, if you have moving objects, which we have in the turntable, so that's why it's always good to have a turntable, is that the noises should be set to PREF. That way the noise are sticking to the rotation or the movement of your objects based on a reference position. And one last thing, we want to apply kind of the same bump mapping that we have on the metal. So I'm just using in for the dust. Yeah, there we go. So now the dust has also its kind of its own bump map. So it's kind of more in line to what this is. And now this is our basic lighting setup. And I think this is a very good start or look to get started with the lighting. So now I think it would be cool to have some really nice color lights and really harsh rim lighting as well. All right, so let's group these guys as a backdrop. This is our shading network, and you can box them up later if you feel like it. And now let's keep working on our lights. So I don't really like the Skydome light as a beauty light. So for now, I will just reduce its exposure to maybe 1.5 negative. So now it's pretty dark. And then I just want to create a quad light, which is our initial key light that we can just plug that into this group here. Quad light 1 or whatever, doesn't matter too much. And now it's about placing. So what I want to do here, I want to split my view to the left, move it over, and then have a viewer connected here. And then this is already pointing to the bottom. Let's just do expand all, look through the render camera, and now we have our lights as well. And now I can just select the light in here, maybe move the view over to the side. So now it depends what you want to do. If you are working in a kind of more in a project environment or production environment, you would potentially use a edit scope just to keep things clean. edit scope, I talked about these things before. So we can just call this light scope for the moment. And we can activate this here in the top right corner. Make sure that is on. And now whatever changes I do will be kind of collected in this light scope. So now if I go back to my light placement and I select this to highlight, I can hold V and click on the sphere, and now my light is coming from that angle. Then I can hit I for the inspector and go back to exposure and pump it up to 10. You can now see we're getting some edges here, or you can go to light editor, make sure this is set to your scope as well, and then you can do the same kind of thing. Boost up the exposure, and let's make the color for this guy maybe red, and make sure replaces this little box at the top left is enabled, so you can actually see the changes coming in. And then let's have a blue light from the opposite side to create some nice contrast. So we'll copy and paste this guy, drop it in here, and then light editor should populate it. It changes its name by default. Let's just go in a similar direction, just as I said, blue, and then make sure it's selected. You can then have everything as we had it. Go to this viewer, select it, and then you click to place it, maybe like this. And then again, we should play with the exposure. We had 12 before, maybe go 12 as well. Now we get this nice blue sheen on it. And you can play with the sizes as well. I'm not sure if it's actually in here. Shape probably. Width and height. Yeah, so you can edit these values, replace them, make them bigger, so they have softer shadows and reach more. And if you look through the perspective view, these are now these two lights. The blue one is probably, could be a little bit more from the side. So let's go back to camera view and see if we can place it a little bit more on the edge. Yeah, so now this gives us a harsher angle. And I feel that, let's say actually mute our light, our sky dome. Okay, I'm not sure why it's updating so slow, but I can kind of see what it's doing. It's probably just a little bit too much still. So we go back to main and let's just reduce it maybe to -2. So it has less contribution. And then back in here, we can create another light, maybe from the top, to just help to get some top-down lighting to shape it a little bit nicer from the top. And then what we would do back in here, we would change the mode to diffuse lighting. Make sure it's selected, hit V to place it to the top here. And now it's pretty much at the top level. Sometimes for these kind of placements, I like to look through the light and then make sure camera is enabled. And then I can actually go maybe frame the dragon first, and then I can place it maybe here, zoom out a little, and go back to perspective. And then our light is all the way up here. And we could potentially make it bigger, scaling it. Where's R? So now it's kind of really big softbox at the top here. And then in the light editor, we can increase exposure. Let's say 10. That didn't do too much. There we go. And this was a pretty quick demo how you can get some shading done. And you can see with the top-down lighting, it's actually looking pretty neat. You can solo them as well in the light editor. I just don't know why it's, there we go. It takes a little bit of time to compute, I guess, to just do the initial compute, and then it's quick again. So everything is working as expected. And I feel this gives us some pretty nice contrast. And yeah, you can change different angles. So from this side, it's obviously fully capturing the red. Then this is the blue, and the top light is just helping us to get some nice shaping going on. And yeah, I will render this in 4K for you to look at, and as usual, the scene files will be available on my Patreon. I will try to clean it up as much as I can to make it more descriptive, and then you should have a really good scene to get going. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.